Hi everyone, I'm finally here, and so is this video. I know it took a while. I got kinda depressed, so I wasn't doing anything for the past couple weeks, but we're finally here, and we're finally talking about, you guessed it, because you looked at the thumbnail and the title of this video most likely, White Pony by Deftones. I love this album. I've been listening to it since I was a literal infant, and now I can finally talk about it for some odd amount of time that I have no control over. But first, I'd like to give a special shout out to Nocturne's White Pony magnum opus. His video is really good at covering the history and background of the album. So if you want to know more about the album and its making, I'd highly recommend watching his video. I'm going to talk mostly about the album itself, like the music and the lyrics. But if you want the background, go watch his video. White Pony by Deftones released June 20th of 2000, going on to get platinum in its first month and win 2 Grammys within its life cycle. Very successful for a new metal band from the 90s, which then brings on the question of how. How was it so successful, and why do people love this album so much? Not only then when it released, but to this day, being an icon of internet meme culture. I'd say it's 3 components: the instrumentation, the themes, and the messaging. And the first 2 are pretty clear for most people who've listened to the album for any extensive period of time, but the last one may be a little hard. So we're going to dive into those 3 when we talk about the album in full. First, we got to talk about the history. Why this album's made, how it was made, and what led to what's one of the best albums of all time. There are a few things to keep in mind when talking about the creation of this album. First and foremost is the fact that the band had just gotten back from 2 different world tours, so they were pretty tired, and the band themselves said that they were ready to make new material, which then leads to one of the first issues with the making of the album in the first place. They had contradictory ideas on what to do within the band. On one hand, you had Stephen Carpenter, the guitarist, who was used to playing heavy-ass shit as per their first 2 albums, Adrenaline and Around the Fur, whereas Chino and other band members didn't want him doing that. So, funnily enough, they wouldn't play over his riffs. They would just stop. They would just let him play his heavy-ass riffs and then leave him alone. But vice versa, he started doing the same thing to them. When they started with melodic singing, he would just stop playing. And it led to this weird compromise where half the songs on the album are very clearly Stephen Carpenter songs and the other half are clearly Chino's songs. And I gotta be honest, I kind of like it. I kind of like the fact that you can tell who made what song and who kind of just went along with the other and made it work to their own style. It's a fascinating yet compelling aspect of the album that I really think adds a lot of depth to it, as well as the fact that they were rock stars at this point. They were doing a lot of cocaine, so much that they themselves have said they were doing tons, which I hope to God they mean literally, because the album sounds like it. Another couple of key aspects to keep in mind when talking about the creation of the album is the introduction of Frank Delgado as the formal DJ of the band. He had worked with them on a couple of tracks from Adrenaline and Around the Fur, but this was his first formal outing with them, and so his inclusion is a lot more in-depth than before. Also, Maynard from Tool contributes to a lot of songs in this album, which I didn't even know for the longest time. He helped produce, write, and even instrument some of the songs on the album, which makes it cooler and also make more sense with some of the heavier sounds that you get at certain points. But we'll get there, starting now. And with that, let's talk about the music itself. With the opening track, Feiticeira, it starts with an intense riff, thudding drums, and Chino wailing about being chased by the cops, only to be shoved in the back of a woman's car. It's got a sense of urgency and mystery that most opener tracks really just don't have. A lot of them tell you what the album's going to be about, but this one very much holds the cards to its chest and lets you find out for yourself. This is also complemented by the refrain at the end of the song, "Soon I'll Let You Go," as if this mysterious woman is promising that she's gonna, be nice and let us go eventually. But you get the sense that because we're on track 1 of 12, that we're not going anywhere anytime soon. And you'd be right. We then move on to the second track, Digital Bath, which manages to keep the intensity and mystery of the first track while taking it a little slower at first. It's really once you get into the first drop of the chorus that you can tell that this is the intensity the album intends to keep up with, and it does a good job at that, especially on the lyrical side where Chino is describing taking you downstairs and toastering your ass in a bathtub. It sounds kind of insane, I know, but the way it's delivered, you can tell that he's getting this kind of sense of like primal sensuality from it. Like it's not something he's doing because he hates you or because he wants to hurt you, but it's more of like he's getting something from it in a sensual, maybe even sexual way. And it very much adds to the main theme of the album, which I'm trying to convey, which is that of, you guessed it, depravity. I did name the video that, after all. Digital Bath also introduces a lot of the lo-fi and shoegaze aesthetics of this album, which the band is known for at this point, but this is really when you first start to see it take shape, and I feel like that's important to mention when discussing not only Digital Bath, but also the rest of the album, which we'll get into. The third track on the album, and my first contender for best song, is Elite. Now this one opens with a heavy riff, thudding drums, and Chino absolutely losing his fucking mind on the lyrics, screaming, "When you're ripe, you'll bleed out of control," which has some interpretations, but we'll get to that in a minute. First, I want to talk about some of the other lyrics, such as, "You like attention because it makes you feel alive," or "You're into depression because it matches your eyes." These are lines that invoke very contradictory feelings, because on the one hand, no one likes depression, but on the other, if you look like shit all the time, you're probably not helping yourself either. It creates this interesting dichotomy that gets played with further into the album and comes into the interpretations of the chorus of this song. Some people believe that this is a straightforward period song. He's just telling the gals how it is, which I don't think is true at all, because Deftones isn't like that. Another interpretation is that this is a message to those who sell out in the music industry, which makes sense. When you're at the peak of popularity is when you typically sell out, and so it makes sense. The third interpretation, and my favorite because I came up with it, is that of Nosebleeds. Like I said before, this album was made when they were doing tons of cocaine, and it would make sense that they'd be nosebleeding all the time, especially when they have a song on their first album literally called Nosebleed. It would make sense that he's telling whoever this is that you're depressed, you're an attention whore, and you're bleeding because you're snorting too much cocaine. It just makes the album better. The fourth song on the album is RX Queen, which introduces a new aspect to the album which we haven't talked about yet: relationships. This one's pretty straightforward. It's a mutually exclusive toxic relationship where they both seem to be insane people. Chino starts the track by saying he won't stop following you, only to then say he'll steal a carcass for you and feed off the virus, so you can tell that this is a loving and endearing relationship. This is also accompanied by a crisp yet distorted drum line and a riff that just hits the right spot, and it really conveys this dark and gritty relationship that just doesn't sound good for anyone, and yet they seem to not be able to stop, which is another part of this whole album that seems to be built up on throughout each song. The idea that they just can't stop. You can't stop. You're already in too deep. Just keep going. And it's interesting to see and how it formulates in such a interesting way. New day, new outfit, same eyeliner. The fifth track on the album is Streetcar, the quintessential Deftones song of the album, and it's easy to see why. The band themselves said it's the most Deftones song, as well as also being a very typical Deftones song. It's got energetic riffs, loud drums, Chino's going absolutely nutty on the lyrics, and overall it's energetic yet grimy at the same time. The insistent, "Now did you get it, write it down," definitely makes you feel like you're in a bar talking to someone who's literally trying to get you to write down their address while you're drunkenly, sloppily looking at this pen and paper that you barely even know how you got your hands on. It fits the vibe and it fits the aesthetic very well, and I think it's a good piece of music for the album. Maybe not because of its insane instrumentation or performances, but more of just the fact that it carries and conveys the theme and messaging of this distorted and grimy setting very well, and in a way that just works. The next song is Teenager, which, I'm gonna be honest, in my personal opinion, is probably the worst song on the album. That being said, when you compare a 7 to a 9, sure it's lower, but I mean, how much lower is it, really? Like, it's not that bad. Not only that, but it does exemplify some of the more lo-fi shoegaze aspects of the album, which I personally am a big fan of, being the fucking Panchico shill that I am. Shout out to the greatest UK band of all time. But anyways, the song is your very typical relationship song where it's written from a teenage Chino's perspective, where he gets rejected and is very upset about it. So when he's insisting that he's done with the new you, he's basically just saying, fuck you for rejecting me and I hope you die, which, yeah, okay. We now move on to the final 5 songs of the album, what I like to call the Gauntlet, because these are probably the best 5 songs in the album, and I don't think it's a competition. To start this off, we have Knife Party, which is both the most straightforward and yet abrasive song on the album, but we'll get to that in a moment. The simplicity of the song is in the lyrics, because Chino tells you exactly what this song is about, and there's no way to misinterpret him. The opening line of the song is, "My knife is sharp and chrome," in this very distorted, almost digitalized voice. So you get the sense that this is a murky character at best. And he goes on to proclaim that he's now the new king of the block, king of the fiends, and he's ready to take a queen. But that's not before a chorus breaks in where he tells everyone that he's sweet and anemic and that he could float here forever. And the instrumentation truly does convey that. I mean, this is what I'd call almost divine nu metal. It's really good, and it does convey that sense that he's high off his balls and he's just living for it. But this then is contradicted by the 250 mark with the introduction of Rodleen Getsick. Do you know who that is? I didn't. She didn't know who Deftones were either, so it's fine. Within one day of meeting Chino, coming downstairs in the studio, and hearing this song played, she was then performing what she describes as operatic scream singing, which is the most metal name for any vocal composer I've ever heard in my life. That being said, it fits what she does on this track perfectly, to a T, I'd say. Get it? T. You don't need to worry about that. Anyways, this vocal performance of hers absolutely annihilates anything Chino could do on this album. And I kind of feel bad because she just goes on and on and on, and she eventually fades out once Chino comes back in. But the layering between the vocals and the instrumentation is perfect, and it really encapsulates this sense of danger and mystique that the entire song and the album as a whole conveys really well, and I think it's a good showcase of that. The other thing is that it then makes the messaging of this song very, very worrisome, because remember, Chino said he was looking for a queen, and we have a guest vocal stepping in, filling the role of a seemingly woman in despair, which only allows one conclusion. That's right, Jesse's arc in Breaking Bad, where he breaks down after murdering a man and continues to devolve as he turns his house into a crack house. I know that's what you were expecting. Now move on to the second song in the gauntlet, Korea, which in its original form was meant to be titled White Pony and was supposed to serve as the lead single of the album, which makes sense because it does all the things that the rest of the album does. It goes hard, it talks about weird nightlife, and it's probably drug related in some way. Now, this song is kind of hard to pin down when it comes to what it's about. I've seen some argue that it's about the band's experience in Korea and Korean nightlife. My personal interpretation is it's about a nightclub in general, like a strip club, especially with lyrics like check the claws and, work your pitch, as in, you're trying to get them inside, you're trying to get them into a, private dance, stuff like that. So the song itself is pretty shady in lyrical content, as you can tell, but the sound is really where it comes in, and it really shows itself off, because not only is most of the song thrashing drums and guitars that don't let up, but then Chino's lyrical performance on this is honestly stellar. The shouted "come inside" is just, it's meaty to say the least. It really makes you feel like you're in this kind of unnecessary yet exciting and enthralling experience. And it's hard to put into words almost because it's conveying it in the most primal of ways through sheer aggression alone, and that just makes it sound better. So you know how I said Elite was the first contender for best song on the album, and how the final 5 tracks are all 10s across the board? Well, Passenger is 11, and it's not even close. Not only is this song probably the best on the album, but it also features the best guest performance, Maynard from Tool. Yeah, that guy, I know, right? Fucking Fibonacci sequence, or whatever the fuck it's called. He's on this. So you already know you're getting into probably the best showcase of musicship on the entire album, and you'd be right to assume so. Everyone brings their A game, from Chino to Maynard to Carpenter to Chang to Delgado. Everyone's going bonkers on this thing. But let's talk about the 2 vocalists on this song, because they're actually quite contrasting men. When recording this song, Chino said that when Maynard came into the studio, he had all of his lyrics written out with gaps in between for Chino to fill in his. Chino, on the other hand, hadn't wrote anything down and was planning to wing it like they normally did. The contrast in these 2 men and how they approach their music is kind of funny, but also makes the song itself more compelling to think about, because these are really different guys who came together with this singular cohesive idea and made this excellent song. And now we get to talk about it. The song opens with this almost industrial-like swirling effect and a Maynard hum in the background to let you know he's on the track. And then drops into these high-speed drums and a high-pitched guitar with Chino and Maynard switching off lyrics in these whispered, almost monotone voices about driving in a car and being the passenger. And the build to the chorus is absolutely phenomenal, with Maynard asking, "Please, this time, drive faster." And once the chorus hits the first time, you get the instinct that, ooh, this song is a banger. But then you get to the second chorus, and it's crushing, it's intense. Maynard's shouting at the top of his lungs, and there's 2 lines in particular that I think encapsulate the entire album, so much so that I'm going to cheat and grab my paper in the middle of this recording to read you them verbatim. He says, and I quote, "Let the whole world look in. Who cares who sees what tonight? Roll these misty windows down so I can catch my breath again." Now, for anyone over the age of 5 watching this video, this song is about car sex. Chino will say that this song is about a passenger in a car not knowing where they're being taken, but anyone who's ever been in a car with another being can get the idea of what they're talking about. I think this singular line encapsulates the entire album perfectly. It feels shady, it feels intense, it feels enthralling, it feels exciting. It invokes all the emotions that I've gotten through this entire album, and it puts them in the smallest, most concise, yet most fulfilling part of the song. And I couldn't ask for more. But there is more. There's an entire outro after this, where Chino just drifts into this drive, and it just works as a very lo-fi, shoegaze, almost trip-hop outro, and then it just kind of drones into the next track. Although Passenger is probably my favorite song on the album, we still have 2 to go, and one of which is the most critically acclaimed song on the album, Change, in the House of Flies. This song has 2 primary interpretations. Chino's interpretation, which is that of watching someone turn into a literal fly, taking them home, clipping their wings, and laughing at them, or my interpretation, where it's kind of the worsening of a person, watching them fall down into the depths of depravity and just kind of laughing at them at their lowest. They're both fucked up interpretations, but this song is probably one of the darkest on the album, and that's taking into consideration songs like Knife Party. So you get the real sense that this song is dark and gritty. That being said, these interpretations are paired with pitched up drums, droning guitars, and murky, yet I dare say angelic vocals, which sounds like a sharp contrast, I know, but you then take into account the lyrical content of the song, like when Chino says just at the bridge of the crescendo, blow me away after he gives you a gun. You get the sense that this is a dark song, yet it's portrayed in a very divine way, and it works to add this kind of sensual nature to an otherwise dark and down track. I think it works pretty well as a closer, but we're not even done yet with the next song, Pink Maggot. Pink Maggot, according to Chino himself, is the outlier of the album, as it's meant to give you a confident end to the album, which makes sense at first as it does feel a bit more energetic in a positive way, but that doesn't take into account the lyrics that are literally need her in the throat, which I don't know how that's helping you become more popular in school, but if anything you're doing is involving violence to gain popularity, you're probably just a politician. That being said, the song does have more positive sounding aspects, like the opening lo-fi aesthetic breaking into a full riff and drum line that sounds a lot more blissful than the rest of the album. Pair this with the droning of the middle section of the track, and it's a good representation of maturity, where the band's now escaping this kind of depraved hole they've been in, and they're searching for the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. This also matches up kind of well with the closing line, all you are is meat, where that sounds nihilistic, but when you take it at face value, he's basically just saying, like, you can do whatever. You're all the same at the end of the day. Nothing takes me apart from you other than the fact that we think and look different, but we're just slabs of meat at the end of the day. And I like that this close gives that kind of optimistic nihilist approach to it. And with that, that's my review of the album. Personally, it's one of my favorites. I've been listening to it almost non-stop for the past month and a half, and I honestly get more out of it every time I listen to it. Like, the production and instrumentation is so fucking stellar. Not only that, but Chino sounds enthralling on every track, and the guest performances, though rare, are absolute standouts in both musicians' careers, as I literally have a tattoo of lyrics from Tool, and I still prefer Passenger to most Tool songs. But just because I'm done with the review doesn't mean I'm done talking about the album. Actually, I have a lot more to say, but I'll try to keep it short for the sake of this video. The first thing I want to touch on is why I named this video Depravity 101. That is because I think this album is basically a handbook on how to be a bad person. If you look at it from the outset, it's this protagonist who goes through these various degrees of illegal and illicit activities, drug-fueled hazes that lead to murderous rampages, driving in the passenger seat of random people's cars just to end up at these mysterious locales where you're probably having more drug-fueled sex. It's a very interesting look at humanity and how people operate in these spaces, and I really like how engaging the sound is along with it, because I think it's an important aspect in conveying that idea. Now, is that the entire theme of the album? Of course not. Each song has its own themes, and it's very clear that not all of them are meant to be this cohesive story, but when you take it in full, when you look at the album from a bird's eye view, it very clearly gets this point across, this point of taboo, rebellious nature, and the exciting yet dangerous aspects of it. And I think it's a great piece of media. I honestly don't know what else to say at that point. It's just stellar, and I'm just happy that it exists. The second thing I want to touch on that's a little bit less related to White Pony specifically, but Deftones at large, is internet culture, specifically memes. Deftones, if you haven't noticed lately, has been featured a lot more prominently in a lot of internet memes. Now, sure, this may just be on the music subgenre type of memes, but I've seen it in other places where it's less musically orientated, and I gotta say, I think it's because of the topics that Deftones typically covers. They cover that young adult teenage lifestyle of living fast with very few cares, and I think it contributes a lot to how people my age and probably your age feel right now. We don't really give a shit. The world sucks, and we kind of just want to have fun, and Deftones is literally that. The world sucks, and we're just gonna live in it how we can. I think it's a both beautiful and worrisome way to interpret their music, because on the one hand it shows that there's this want for care and love and excitement, but on the other hand we just kind of know that it doesn't exist like that in the modern world. You can interpret it any way you want. Those are simply my understandings of the album, my interpretations, and what I've liked to interpret the songs as. Do you have to follow this? Of course not. I'm on YouTube. Do you think I care if you care about my opinion? Okay, a little bit, but like not that much. I personally couldn't give less of a shit. I just hope that you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you in 2 months when I feel like making a Tool video because I'm bored.